and I want to welcome you to the PowerShell Crash Course workshop that I've created. I actually created this course for the ISSA Central Maryland chapter. They wanted I'm not sharing. There we go. So they wanted a quick refresher or an intro into PowerShell. And so this is what I came up for them. Most of everything that's in this presentation you can find in the PowerShell in a Month of Lunches book by I forget the authors, Don Jones and his partner Jeffrey. So with that being said, all this stuff is stuff that's out there on the internet. I just kind of correlated it all and put it into one presentation. Speaking of which, so if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and interrupt me, or I've got the chat box open. You can put your questions in there and I'll try and scan it and answer your questions as we go along. So about me, I've been in the service for just over 24 years now. I work for the Maryland National Guard full-time as an AGR soldier. Actually, we're deployed right now to Fort Meade. And I also work as a TA for a company called Trilogy. We were teaching, it was a 6-month boot camp for cyber. Me and another guy, we kind of got about 15 to 20 people through that program and have some pretty sharp people entering the cyber workforce because of that. I'm also currently an adjunct professor for Howard Community College. Right now, we're finishing up our Net Plus course. And next semester, I think he's kind of got plans for me to teach the IDS, IPS section. So I have that to look forward to. And prior to me coming into cyber, I spent many, many years as a systems administrator. So I've been doing PowerShell since version 2 came out, which was back in Windows, I want to say Windows 8 is whenever I first discovered it. So that's how long I've been doing PowerShell. And we're up to what PowerShell 7.1 just got, the public release just got released a couple weeks ago. So that's how long I've been doing PowerShell. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't know everything about PowerShell. I still go and look things up consistently. So if you find yourself doing that a lot, don't worry about it. As we all do it. So the question comes up is, so why do I need to learn PowerShell? Why do I need to learn scripting anyway, period? We've got all these great and wonderful tools out there that's going to do all this magic for us. So why do we need to learn scripting? Well, just because you have all these tools that do all this great and wonderful things for you, I have found in my experience that they don't do everything to 100% the way I want it done. So they might produce an output that I might need to modify for another tool. So here's where scripting comes in. So anytime you do anything that is repetitive, scripting gives you an upper hand in that arena. But then we have one-offs, but I'm only going to do this one time. And just building a script will take 3 days. I can get this job done in 20 minutes. Well, that's true. But if we go back to my experience, very rarely have I had to do the same task only once. By the second time, or my rule of thumb is by the third time I'm doing this task, I better be creating a script for it. I've got a buddy. It's funny. He's the Linux guy and I'm the Windows guy. So my Linux buddy, his rule of thumb is if I'm doing it a second time, I'm building a script for it. So there's those rules of thumb out there. So that's why one-offs aren't really one-offs, because you're eventually going to come back and do it again. But the GUI is so much faster because it's only 3 clicks. If I have to write a script, it's going to take me 3 days. This is true if you're only going to do the task the one time. And I go back to that, you're going to do that task more than once. And yes, you can go click, click, click and accomplish it 3 times. But if you do it over multiple times, it's going to be longer. It's going to take longer in the long run. Here's a prime example. Me and 2 other sysadmins, we would be sitting in our little cubicles or whatever, and something would come down saying, hey, we had a new conference come in. We need to build 300 user accounts. Or, hey, we need to change this attribute in Active Directory, and I've got 600 users. Well, I had one buddy who would say, I'll start at the top of the list. My other buddy would say, I'll start at the bottom of the list. I would open up PowerShell. By the time I had my script created that would change the attributes, they were only about 10 to 15 people in, and they were going through the GUI and clicking. So yeah, while the GUI is faster for the one time, if you have to do it multiple times, it's going to take longer. In routine tasks, I use scripting for a lot of routine tasks. A prime example of this one would be, let's move into the security side of things. So there's a framework out there that says, hey, you need to disable all your inactive users in Active Directory. Okay. Well, my last organization used to pay for a program that did this until I learned PowerShell. And then now I had PowerShell go through Active Directory, look at the last logon timestamp attribute of every user, and then disable them if their logon timestamp was greater than 30 days. And then I threw that PowerShell script into task scheduler. I built a whole server just to run my scripts. So I would schedule the task scheduler to run my PowerShell script on the first day of every month, and then send me an email whenever it ran. So then if on the first day of the month, if I didn't get that email, I knew my script was broke or task scheduler was broke or whatever, and I could go fix it. But that was a routine task, and we always kept our Active Directory clean because of it. So I don't know what everyone's scripting or development background is, but in here are the 4 environments we're going to tend to use. We're going to tend to use the PowerShell console, which is default. It comes on every Windows system. It's the little icon, blue icon with the less than, equal than, or the greater than, equal than sign. That's going to open up this shell. Let me see if I can get my little pointer. So if you can see, it has this little icon here, that's going to be the PowerShell icon. The default look of this is not like this. It's actually going to be a blue background with white lettering. I tend to change mine because I don't like the default. So here is the PowerShell ISE. That's the integrated scripting engine. This I used to use consistently for an extremely long time. Every IDE that I had tried didn't actually do what I needed it to do. So the ISE is really great. It actually helps you learn PowerShell because it does have syntax completion. And a lot of the other IDEs I used didn't have that, and so it was extremely hard to learn PowerShell this way. Also, it has a list of PowerShell commandlets that you can kind of search through. So it kind of helps transition you from the GUI point of doing things to the command line point of things. And it was really great because you could also type in your code in the white box. You could run execute, and it would execute down here in the blue box. So you could kind of see what your output was and see where your errors were. And not only did it have syntax completion, but it had syntax or error not error handling, but it would show you where the errors are. So it was really great. And then along came new hotness, which is VS Code. This is my preferred IDE. This is actually the IDE we're actually going to be in for most of the day, just because it's so much like the ISE, but it's so much better because I can do more than just my PowerShell in here. I can do my YAMLs. I can do everything. XML, JSON. This IDE does it all. So this is the IDE we're going to be in most of the day. Yeah. So it'll also do Python if you've got it installed on your Windows machine. But VS Code also runs on your Mac and your Linux. So you could also do your Python in there. And then we also have the new terminal for Windows. This is my new favorite terminal as well, because it defaults to my PowerShell, but I don't know how well you can see these tabs, but I have a PowerShell, my command prompt, my Azure shell, and on my actual Windows machine, I also run the Linux Windows subsystem for Linux. So I can pull up those terminals in a tab. I've even written a blog post, and I think I might have posted the pictures to where you could actually, instead of having tabs, you could actually separate them in different windows within the same screen. So kind of like a Terminator for Bash. So it was really great. But we're going to mainly be in the VS Code for the rest of the day. All right. So to get everybody talking about the get everybody's language the same. So we're going to talk about terminology. So when you hear me, if you hear me say the word commandlet, this is a native PowerShell term. It refers to the verb noun syntax that you're going to see that PowerShell uses, right? So, and it's just that. So get help will be a commandlet. Get process is a commandlet. Things like that. You'll also see people, whenever they're building their functions, use the verb noun syntax. So their functions will typically be a commandlet as well. So a function, I just mentioned it. So you take a group of code that kind of does things in a sequential order and you give it a name. That is going to be your function. If I remember to show it, I've got a couple that I built for my CPT. One of the guys needed me to build something that would back up his files. And that's basically what I called it, was backup TAC files. And inside there, it searched your documents and your C drive for anything that ended in a certain extension. It copied them to a share somewhere, and that was it. So it was a sequential process of doing things that I put into a group and gave it a name. So that's basically what a function is. A workflow, I haven't mastered a workflow, but I believe I've done a workflow. So workflow is going to be similar to a function, but it consists of more than just one system. So here's an example. I was in the middle of creating a remove user tool for my last organization. And what I ended up having to do was to actually get rid of the user out of our environment totally. I had to disable his account in Active Directory, which is the first system. And then I had to go out to the file server and delete all basically his home directory and his user files. That was the second system. The third system, I had to go out to our Horizon View system to delete his virtual machine because we used VDI. So that was a third system. And if I had access to the Exchange server, I was going to have to go out to the Exchange server and delete his mailbox. And then once I did all that, go back to Active Directory to delete his account. So that would have been 4 to 5 different systems that I was going to have to touch with this one script. That is a workflow. Similar to a function, but it spans multiple systems instead of just one system. That's how we're gonna use those. And an application. So in this context, an application is going to be any external program outside of PowerShell. So your ping.exe is going to be an application. Your netsh.exe is going to be an application. Any other utilities similar to that, sc.exe. If you guys aren't familiar with that, that's how we used to control services prior to PowerShell. And so that's where we're going to go with that. And then a command, what we're going to call a command is basically, let's say we take a commandlet and then we add each of its attributes, or not attributes, but its parameters. So get service, and I'm going to do computer name, localhost, right? That's a command. So you take your commandlet with all of its parameters. A command can also be used interchangeably with the applications. So I'm going to do a ping-a. Well, that's the application with its -a parameter. So that's going to be a command as well. So that's how we're going to use that terminology. And then aliases. I'm going to tell you throughout the rest of this day that I hate aliases, but I tend to use them. So it's kind of hypocritical of me. And here's why. I don't like aliases because if you're building a tool for somebody else to use and they open up your script or your tool and they go to try and read what's going on, if you're using a bunch of aliases, especially custom-made aliases, they're not going to have any idea what that script does. And with PowerShell, you have tab completion, so it's not that hard to type in a couple letters and hit tab, right? Okay, you might have to hit tab a couple times to get the right commandlet, but it's not that hard, and it makes your code so much easier to read. However, whenever I'm actually writing a tool, that's what I'll do. But if I'm on the command line and just doing something real quick for me, you're going to see me use a couple aliases. That's just because it is a little bit faster, but it's for my own personal use, and I'm probably not going to use that command again unless I put it into a script and then I'm going to spell it out. But what an alias really is it's a shortcut of saying something. So let's say we want to type out the commandlet of get child item. Instead of saying get-child item, we're going to do GCI, which is an alias for get child item. Then the ones I really can't stand are the question mark and the exclamation point. I always get them backwards. So for each object, I believe is the question mark. So if you're reading across a commandlet or in a command and you see a question mark, it throws me off every time. I have to stop and think about what it is before I can finish reading what's going on. So those are my personal opinions on aliases. You're going to end up doing what you do. You're going to find your own way. And if you use aliases, that's fine. Just know if I read your code, I'm going to get a little angry. So here's a little bit how a PowerShell command structure is going to look like, right? So we're going to have our alias, or not our alias, but our commandlet, which is get event log right here. And then we're going to have our parameter, which can be a single value, as it is here, which is going to be your log name, and we're going to get the security log, essentially. It could have multiple parameters. So our second parameter here is going to be computer name, and it's going to be comma separated. So win8, comma server 1. And I think, if I remember correctly, I attempted this the other day, and I don't think, if you have a space in here, it's going to throw it off. It's only going to grab the first machine and not the second one. So make sure there's no space in there, but it is comma separated. And then we have what we call our switch parameters, which are binary, either true or false, on, off, however you want to look at it. But in this case, we're going to do verbose, which means it's going to give us a bunch of information. So that's a basic command structure of a PowerShell command. Any questions so far? I've been rambling for about 20 minutes now. None. Okay. I must have hid the slide. One thing I did want to point out is the flow of today's presentation. It's going to be a lot of lecture, but I'm going to be in PowerShell quite a bit, kind of doing labs. You can follow along if you wish. And I can't remember if the announcement said that there was a CTF or not, but unfortunately, because I added a bunch of new stuff, there's not going to be time for a CTF. And I accidentally broke it a couple weeks ago and haven't been able to fix it. So I can't give you access to it either. So I'm sorry. I'll fix it one day and maybe send the link out. But unfortunately, there won't be a CTF after today. But we will have a lot of demos, and we'll be in PowerShell quite a bit here in a little bit. All right. So now that I've broken your hearts about the CTF, let me make you guys happy again by letting you know there's only really 3 commands in all of PowerShell that you have to memorize. And it's on this slide right here. It's these: get help, get command, and get member. We're going to spend some time playing with these right here. Those are the only 3 you need to remember. So before we get there, as soon as you install PowerShell or you get onto a new Windows box, first thing you need to do is run this command right here, update help. Once you update your help, these 3 commands right here, you can't see it. These 3 commands right here will be much greater help to you. So here's how we use these. So get help. So you're going to use get help, and you're going to use some sort of noun, right? Let's say get help star user star. It's going to show you, oh no, let me back up. Get command. We're going to use get command first, because we know we need to do something with user accounts. So get dash help, or get dash command star user star. Give me all the commandlets out there or commands that have the word user in it. It's going to come back with a bunch, and then you go, okay, well, what can I, you're going to look at that list and go, okay, you're going to see something that jumps out at you and go, okay, I think this is what I need to do based on whatever the verb is, right? Because I want to get something. So I'm going to get local user. All right. So I know I need to get local users. So how do I use it? So you're going to use get dash help, and the commandlet you want help on, and then you're going to read through the help file. If you're used to Bash or Linux, it's real similar to manning whatever command you want, right? Reading the command file. That's what get help gets you. And then what's unique with PowerShell is, since everything is an object, there's things you can do with it. So that's where get member comes in handy. So once you have, once you've gotten the command that you want to use, you've read up on how to use it. Well, what can you do with it? Well, that's where you get member, and it's going to give you all of the methods you can do. It's going to give you all the properties you can do things with. And there's, see, methods, properties. Can't remember the third thing, but we're going to see it here in a minute. All right, can I clear that eraser? Yeah. All right. So now, when we get into Get Help, you're going to see the help structured differently. So if you're in Get Help and you see this parameter and then type, and it's surrounded by double brackets, so 2 here and 1 at the very end, this means this is an optional parameter. That means the commandlet can operate without it, which is fine. If you see parameter, the parameter name surrounded in single brackets, it's mandatory and it's positional, meaning that generally a positional parameter is right after the commandlet is where it's going to look for it, but it's not always the case. Typically it is. So you're going to have your commandlet and then a mandatory parameter, kind of like when we're looking at get win event log or get event log, where it had the commandlet of or the parameter of log name and it said security. That is actually a mandatory one if we look at the get help, and it's got to be there in that position, and that's what that means. And then you're going to have where parameters not surrounded in anything means it's non-positional. It means it can be anywhere within the command, and PowerShell will pick it up and know what it is. So let's look at some of that. All right. So here we are. We're in our VS Code. I hope everybody can see that just fine. All right, so discovering commands. So the first thing, like I said, we're going to update help. And as you can see, we're updating help. And it will throw an error at the end. For some reason, there's a certain thing that it cannot update. I haven't figured out what it is just yet. And it's going to take a minute. And you can see that it's updating all the different modules that PowerShell has. All right, so like I said, it failed to update the config defender PS read line, which is fine. We're not going to use those today anyway. So get help. We know we want to do something with the event logs, but maybe it's not listed as event. So we're going to try to get help with even, right? Let's see what we get. All right, so we see that we came back with a ton of stuff. We got get event, event subscriber, register events, get win event, new event, all this stuff. All right, so we kind of go through here and we found what we're looking for. We were actually looking for get event log. So when we get help, I think this is where, yeah. Okay, so I got to change my terminal. Here we go. So for those of you that just noticed what I was doing, whenever I said I love VS Code, with PowerShell 7.1 or with PowerShell 7, or actually ever since 6, you could run different versions of PowerShell side by side. And that's what I've got going on here. I can switch my terminal. So this PowerShell here is version 5. And then this one is version 7. If I do, so the problem is this get when event, or this event log, is no longer available inside PowerShell 7. It's actually when event, right? So if I were to do get help, now I'm getting some help for get when event. The get event log has been deprecated. But if I move back to PowerShell 5.0, 5.1, oh, hang on. So it's still available in 5.1. However, you notice it didn't give me back any information. It's because in PowerShell 7, I updated the help. Remember, these are running side by side. So because I updated it in 7, it did not, my help didn't update in 5. So let's go back and let's go ahead and update. All right, we're going to give that a minute to run. We're going to go back to 7. All right. So we got that. So what commands can we get with a get when event? So here's all the different event commands that we can get. This is why I say running get command is more beneficial if you run it first. You can run in any order you want, but I just find it a little bit easier. So we have get when event, we have get event log. All right, so we did that. So get net firewalls. So let's change this to firewall. All right. So here we go. Here's all of our different firewall commandlets that we can use. The one we want is, let's get the net firewall rules. And then let's get the members, excuse me, so we can see what we're going to do with it. So we're going to run that, get member. And here we go. So these are all the different things that I can do with the firewall. I can get the group, the ID, the loose source mapping, names, some methods. These are things that I can do with it. Dispose equals, get type, toString. And then here's all the different properties that can be set. All right, instance ID, mandatory, owner. So a lot of things we could do with it. So now we're going to do another commandlet that wasn't talked about yet. It's called show command. So show command. So if you remember earlier, I was talking about the ISE is a good transition from going from your GUI way of things to the command line way of things. You can do the same thing with PowerShell 7, but you have to do a show command, which brings up this dialog box. So these are the different attributes for the get process, right? So if we were to do get help get process, the command line should show us the same thing. Oh, let me do so I had to do the get full so that we could get a list of the different parameters. We saw a name parameter, saw the module, let's just do a compare. Name, ID. So is there an ID? Module input. Yep, there was an ID. File version. Input. Name. All right. So let's do another comparison. Let's close that out. One more thing I want to look at is like GM is an alias for get member. So properties, session ID, start info, methods, events. Yeah, so there was the ID, and I believe there was a name. So yeah, the show process, or the show command will bring up that GUI dialog box that you can interact with to get to understand that particular commandlet better. So that's how basically that's how you're going to learn PowerShell right there, is from this one slide. That's how I actually learned it, just by reading a bunch of help files. I did read some books, and there are a bunch of videos out there that helped me get better. And there's even more coming. One of the things I did is I helped this Sands instructor kind of go through one of his new PowerShell classes that he was building. So maybe we'll have that on the horizon one day. But next thing we're going to talk about is PowerShell is great because it can also use your external commandlets, right? So think about this. How many times have you been sitting at a Windows machine and the first terminal you see is an actual PowerShell terminal, but you go in the terminal and you type in ipconfig. Well, ipconfig is actually an application outside of PowerShell, but PowerShell knows how to interpret it as a commandlet, or not a commandlet, but a command. And here's a couple other nuggets of information that I've come across. I've not mastered them, but if you use the and symbol, it'll execute a command within a commandlet. So you're building out a command, a PowerShell command, and inside there's something you need to do. Maybe there's not a commandlet for it. A prime example of this would be, I was building a create new user tool back in PowerShell 2.0, and there was no Active Directory commandlet that would move a user from one OU to another OU. So I actually had to use the ds move commands that would move those within my PowerShell script. And I had to do something similar to this. And then this here, I've played with this, and I haven't been able to get it to work. I don't know if it's a PowerShell 3 thing, and maybe it's just deprecated. But what happens is, what this is supposed to do is, let's say we're running a dir command. Well, we're going to see here later where dir within PowerShell is actually an alias for get child item, right? Well, dir in the command prompt is actually a command as well. So PowerShell is going to have a problem distinguishing between the two. Which one are you really trying to do? So if you were to do like a dir/s to get all the subdirectories within a PowerShell terminal, it's going to error out because it doesn't know what to do with the /s. This is where the --% is supposed to work. You're supposed to use it as dir and then %/s. And it's supposed to interpret that /s as what dir exe needs, not get child item. I know it's confusing. It sounds confusing, and you probably won't see much of this, so I wouldn't stress about it too much. Just know if you ever see it, you can come back to this slide. Maybe it'll give you a refresher, give you something to Google. But one great thing with PowerShell is that it's got great errors. Back in the day, if you were ever in the command prompt and you were ever doing anything with the commands, if it errored out, you'd get some sort of generic error. Like, yeah, it errored out. Here's some big long error code. We're not going to tell you what it is, but just know that you have an error. I don't know how many times I've seen that. It's so frustrating trying to troubleshoot that. Well, with PowerShell is great because they tend to start telling you what was wrong. If I were to do get space help, it says the term get is not a recognized name of a commandlet, which is true because the commandlet itself is get dash help or get tac help, right? So that's how you're gonna, I mean, it pretty much tells you that it doesn't know what get commandlet is. So you just look at it and go, oh, I forgot the dash. The second example here is, it says dir, second path fragment must not be a UNC drive, or must not be a drive or UNC name. I'm like, what does that mean? So I look up here and I go, okay, well, dir, that's a commandlet for get child item, or no, it's dir. I'm trying to do a directory listing of my C windows. Okay, the second path of fragment. And then, I mean, it just takes a minute. You keep reading. Okay, so there, yeah, category info, invalid argument, C window string, get child item, get child item. I didn't do get child item. I wanted a directory listing. Well, dir is an alias for get child item. So if it's trying to interpret this as get child item, it has no idea what the // is. So now I need to figure out what the recursive for get child item is, and maybe that error will go away. So let's take a look at that. Here we go. Do I have a, nope, I don't have a, okay. So like I said, we do a get space help, we're gonna get an error, just like I said. So if we do get help, this will work here in a minute, but it's also a good time for me to pause and say, if you're ever in a terminal on the command line, you see where I hit tab and I went to get dash help, but I accidentally hit it again and I went to get dash history. If you hit shift and then tab, I might have broke it. Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. Shift tab. Shift tab. Yeah, shift tab. If you don't click anywhere else, and you realize you pass what you're looking for, you can hit shift tab and it'll take you backwards to get help. All right, so there's my get help, and it works. So the next one we wanted to look at was dir. dir c:\Windows /S. We get that same thing. But if I do dir, or actually let's do get tac help. Okay. So we see that dir is actually get child item. So now we're trying to look for the recursiveness of it. So syntax, let's so get child item filter attributes, compress, hidden, encrypted, path, filter, attributes, compress, force, follow, directory. We do have a recurse. Okay, so now we know in order for that command to work, we don't need a /s, we just need recurse. Now we have it. So believe it or not, these error messages are pretty helpful these days. One other thing I'd like to point out here while we're here, if I do dir, if I don't know what comes next, or let's do get child item. If I don't know what comes next, I really want to get lazy and not look at the get help. If I do a dash, then I hit control and my space bar, it'll actually pull up all the different parameters that I could use next. And then you could actually just use your arrow keys to select what you're looking for. Actually, the next one is path. So, and then C:\\. Another thing I want to point out here is this path. We do get child item. We'll see that it's a mandatory positional, meaning that we really don't even need the path because whatever comes after get child item has to be the path. So we could get by without this word, but if you're creating a tool for somebody else to read, I would recommend keeping it in there, right? So now we have that. So if I do attack, control, space bar, so I could see what other attributes or I could use, parameters. Here they are. I can search for hidden, read only, and all that. So this is another way, another tip that's going to help you learn how to use PowerShell much quicker. Let's go and enter again. I don't have any hidden